So that's the motor that I want to replace. It's completely corroded, can't turn it. I have hacked into it a little bit. I can highly recommend that if you are going to do it, you buy the motor directly from Apis Queen, because they will fix wires to it and waterproof it free of charge. That cost me 100 Australian dollars delivered to Australia, and I just love it. The one I ordered didn't have the wires connected, and I had to do this myself, and it was challenging. There's always the worry that you're going to mess it up. So I highly recommend Apis Queen directly from their website in China, and you just have to ask them to do that. I specified a certain length. I didn't need it that long. They put 4mm plugs on the end, whereas in the motor that you have, they're 3mm bullet plugs, which I bought separately, which I'll show you later. Before you decide you're going to do it yourself, you have to ask yourself why you're doing it. Now, I wanted to do it myself because I didn't care if I was going to mess it up. The thing cost me 300 Australian dollars. It was going to cost me 500 Australian dollars. That included postage to Latvia, which is 14,000 kilometres away. If it had been in Australia, postage might have been $20, $30, and maybe I would have had it done by them. But their service centre is in Europe, a long way away. So there are some challenges with it, and if you're willing to risk messing it up, go do it. I was happy to do that. I like making things, and I thought I had the skills to do it. The first thing is to get this base off. There are some little plugs there. You flick those off, and then you'll find there's some sealer in there. You just scrape that out a bit, and you'll use the 2mm hex head to undo those. So undo those, and then you have to break this seal here. So I used a single edge razor blade, and I started by pressing into the seam there. You can't do any harm by doing that, and as you do that, you need to lever this a little bit, and I started on both sides a little bit, and you work your way along levering it. Sometimes you might want another pair of hands, and you leave one in there to keep the gap open, and then as you go along further you can slide that along and keep it open. Eventually you get both sides done, and that will lift out. That will reveal the wiring, which you'll see later in the video, and they just unplug. The wiring is just some little plugs that you pull out. There's 3 of them, and they will be able to get pulled out of here. To get this off, you need, again, the hex head screwdriver. There's 4 screws there, and once you undo that, that will pull off and the wires will just pull through. It's pretty simple. The hard part is getting this thing off. I didn't break it. I did dent it a little bit, but because you're going to seal it up later, you'll see there's 2 rubber seals that seal it up. I've attached the 3 wires by soldering onto some little metal pads that are there. It was quite challenging. In hindsight, if you could buy a motor with the wires attached, I'd go for that. What I also did, I used some surfboard resin just to fill up that section there, so all the wires are insulated, and if they move around they're not going to touch. Plus they're really locked in, there's no way you can pull those out. You could use some epoxy resin or some sort of epoxy adhesive, but for me it makes it really solid and safe. Ali Lexter has put online a video on how to take the fin off. I'm just going to quickly show you, but his is really good. There's a little cap on here, and you have to sort of cut 2 grooves into it so that you can use a pair of pliers to turn that off, to unscrew it. So once you've got a bit of a groove in both sides, you can lock that up, get your pliers, and that just unscrews. I've done another one and that actually snapped off, so this one worked out alright. Then that just lifts off, and there are 4 screws that you undo here. Again, you're using the hex head, and that just unscrews those there. I've done 3 already, so there's the last one there, and that comes off like that. And then you can access those screws in here to pull this body off. So I'm going to feed the 3 wires through this rubber seal here. It doesn't have any sealer on it, silicone. It just sits in that place there. But it is filled up with silicone in there, so I think I will put a little bit on there, down the bottom there, and then push it through. I'm just using a silicone sealant. I've always got some lying around in the shed. When you think about it, it's only ever in the water for a few hours, and you know, then it's rinsed, so I think silicone is the go. Okay, so what I had, because I filled this up here, I've had to trim off some of this white plastic. It's going to be fine. Maybe I should have done that. Anyway, that's the point of you watching it, so you don't make the same mistakes. I've trimmed it off. I'm going to squirt some silicone in there to fill up any gap there. I've managed to get the motor fixed to this base plate. The issue was the white silicone sealing pad stops you from putting these short screws in because it has to be compressed. I tried all sorts of ways of pushing that up, but what I worked out was using some screws that normally go in the base plate. For example, from this one here, the screws here, they're slightly longer, and I stacked up some washers there, screwed those 4 longer screws in with the washers, and was able to grab, and I evened up the tension on all of them, and then I backed one at a time off and screwed in the very short ones, and so it's all nicely pulled up now. So it's going to be ready to feed through the hole here, which will come out here and join up to these. Now I've cut these because I want to keep these joiners here because I believe they're gold plated, and they make a really good contact and they don't corrode. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to thread this through here and feed them up. So I've got the 3 wires going up. I can see them pushing up. Before I run out of room, I'm going to apply some silicone in here and then just fix it on with 4 screws onto the base. So now I've got the wires here. I can match up with those. I'll join those on later. I've just got to screw this down with 4 screws that go in there. Done. Hi. So the little package arrived from Amazon. There's about 20 in there, male and female. This is the 3.5mm bullet gold-plated connector, and they are exactly the same as the ones on the fin. So I'm going to be connecting those. That's the original, and this is one I did yesterday, and it's just a matter of heating up a little bit of solar in there and then popping the wire on, holding it there for a second or so for it to harden up. Then I'll put some shrink wrap around it to insulate it. So I'll put some masking tape around it because it just makes the cleanup easier. I'm going to put silicone around this edge here and slip it in there, and I'll start tightening the screws up gradually. That should do it. Slip that top, and any excess will come out, and just tighten the screws till you get a little bit of tension in each one, and that spreads the load as you're tightening up. If you've ever done a head gasket, you don't want to warp the head, so it's a bit like that, just doing a little bit at a time, so you're pulling it down evenly. You will know when it's the end. I think that's it. So I'm just going to grab a tissue or 2, wipe that off. A little bit the other side. Like that. Pull this tape off. And we've got minimal mess. I'm just going to use my finger to put a little bit of silicone on top. Yeah, I'm just using the tip of the screwdriver actually. I'm just plopping them on top of the screws here. I think it was way too big. And alright. I did check before that it was all working. Okay, all ready to go. Propellers back on. All sounds good. Got to test it out on the board. Cheers.